Many people know, but many people don't, that Nicolas Cage got very close to play Superman in the cinema, in a movie that would be directed by none other than Tim Burton and written by Kevin Smith, the guy that I talked about in the last video. This is the timeline of how everything went. Kevin Smith was hired to write a script for the new Superman after 2 versions of Superman Reborn didn't go anywhere. The movie would still adapt the comic book saga Death and Return of Superman, now with a new title of Superman Lives. Then Warner decided to hire Tim Burton for the movie, thinking of the logic of repeating the success of the first Batman in 1989, and repeating the same logic of calling an unusual actor but excellent for the role. They cast Nicolas Cage, that although everybody knows him for being the Mr. Trash movies in his career, at the time he was coming from an Oscar of Best Actor for the movie Leaving Las Vegas, and also 3 action movies that I consider classics of the genre: The Rock, Con Air, and Face Off, which means the guy was on top. But as usual, Tim Burton didn't like Kevin Smith's script and hired his own writer called Wesley Strick to redo the whole thing. That initiated a long story of script rewrites because the studio was never satisfied with the story, and also because there was a 4th element that should be added to the problematic story: a very eccentric producer named John Peters, an individual that had his heart in the right place in wanting to make a bombastic Superman movie. But his wishes were quite bizarre, like initially he didn't want Superman to fly or wear his blue suit with red cape. But the most bizarre wish was that he wanted Superman to fight a giant spider in the 3rd act of the movie. Everyone who has seen the Flash movie knows what I'm talking about. At the end of the day, Tim Burton's Superman didn't go ahead because the script was being rewritten so many times that the production costs were getting higher and higher. And with the box office failure of some of the studio's movies at the time, including Batman and Robin, Warner decided to cancel the movie, which is a shame because the cast of the movie could have been very interesting. We would have or Sandra Bullock or Courtney Cox as Lois Lane, Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor, and Chris Rock as Jimmy Olsen. But the whole story is much better told by Kevin Smith himself in a lecture that he gave to some cinema students that you can find the video on YouTube, and especially a documentary that is phenomenal called The Death of Superman Lives, which also could be easily found on YouTube, with interview with all the involved in the production, including Tim Burton himself. Meanwhile, in the Batman universe, after the disaster of the 4th movie, the studio still wanted to do a 5th movie, which would bring the villains Scarecrow and Harley Quinn in a movie that would still be directed by Joel Schumacher, director of the 3rd and 4th movie, with the possibility of Harley Quinn being played or by Madonna or by Courtney Love, which means that the studio already wanted a blonde singer for the character since then. The Scarecrow would have been played by none other, yes, you guessed, Nick Cage. Joel Schumacher talked to him during the shooting of Face Off and called him to play the character. A script was written called Batman Unchained or Batman Triumphant, depending of which rumor do you see in the internet. And although this script has never leaked, we know that in the 3rd act, the Scarecrow would use his fear toxin against Batman, and he would hallucinate the returns of some old villains from the franchise, including Penguin, Catwoman, Riddler, Two-Face, and with all the actors that played them before returning to these characters, especially Joker from Jack Nicholson. Then, there was an alternative script written in case this one didn't go ahead, and this one was called Batman Dark Knight, with 1 K only, joining the 2 words. And this script would have the Scarecrow also as the main villain, but we would have the Man-Bat as a secondary villain. He would be transformed into the creature by the Scarecrow. And this script is available on the internet, and the Robin of Chris O'Donnell would be in both of them. But in this one, he would be a 40-year-old college student, which is very funny. And if I'm not mistaken, in both versions, he would become the Nightwing character in the end. By what I read from this script, he has the same problem of Batman 2 from Sam Hain, which I mentioned in the other video. It's a very fun script, but not very cinematic as a Batman movie should be. After that, you already know, none of these projects came into fruition. So the studio started to plan two possibilities for a possible franchise reboot. Or make a Batman Beyond movie, adapted from the excellent animated series, or make a Batman Year One movie based on the excellent comic book from Frank Miller. The Batman Beyond project had a script written by Paul Dini, the same creator from the animated series, and the director would be a guy named Boaz Yakin, who directed the movie Clash of Titans. The script never leaked, unfortunately, and Boaz Yakin revealed later that he wasn't very interested in directing this project anyway, so the idea was tossed away very quickly. Meanwhile, in Batman Year One, this project came very far into production. The director, Darren Aronofsky from Requiem for a Dream, was called to direct it. He actually wrote the script and was kinda in the process of casting, with two likely options for Batman. Aronofsky wanted none other than Joaquin Phoenix to play the Bat. Yeah, I know, like you, I just keep wondering. Meanwhile, the studio wanted some good-looking guy like Freddie Prinze Jr. This one I prefer not to imagine. This script is also available on the internet. I read it and I loved it. It's pretty serious in tone and follows the mood of the comic books very faithfully. But there are some ideas that would not please the audience, like a Bruce Wayne who was not a billionaire, but an almost homeless guy that lived in a car repair and was raised by a mechanic named Big Al, which means Alfred in this version would be a mechanic. But take it easy. The script would take things to a more familiar approach towards the end of the movie. Well, as we know, this project also didn't go ahead. And back to Superman, what the studio was trying to do to bring him back to the screen? In the year 2000s, the first movements to reboot the series started to happen with a script from the director J.J. Abrams that would be called Superman Flyby, a project that landed in the hands of two quite irregular directors in my opinion. McG from the Charlie's Angels movies and Brett Ratner from the Rush Hour movies. At the same time, the studio also had the idea of making a Batman vs. Superman movie that would have the director Wolfgang Petersen, director from the movie Troy, and would possibly be starred by Colin Farrell as Batman and Jude Law as Superman for some reason. The interesting thing is that there was a battle inside the studio to decide which project would go ahead, Superman Flyby or Batman vs. Superman, with the executives making a vote and deciding for the Superman project. That decision happened because there was an interest to reboot the character in the movies. And guess what happened? Nothing. Details of the script leaked on the internet, and the story would be about baby Kal-El coming to Earth, but in this version, Krypton as we know would not be destroyed, but would be in a civil war. There would be some other strange ideas like a Lex Luthor that would reveal himself as a Kryptonian in the end, so these ideas didn't please the producers very much, and we had another project cancelled. Back in Gotham City, things were a little better with the Batman franchise finally starting and developing into the Christopher Nolan trilogy. But between the movies, by the years 2006 or 2007, a project of the Justice League was greenlit by the studio, which would be directed by George Miller, a genius behind the Mad Max trilogy. And this production went very far with a full script, a full cast. There are some production photos of the Australian actress Megan Gale as Wonder Woman in the internet. The story would be based on the comic book saga Tower of Babel, with Batman having countermeasure plans to fight the Justice League in case they became villains someday. And this movie was cancelled because there was a writer's strike at the time, and the delays of the production cost too much for the studio, including the costs to shoot the movie in Australia, where it would be shot. This is a movie that deserves a documentary detailing all the production issues and some curiosities, including the facts that the actors DJ Coultrona and Adam Brody would play Superman and Flash respectively, but later they got other superhero roles in the Shazam family in the two Shazam movies. And back in Metropolis, things started to move slowly. In 2006, we had Superman Returns, which is more like a sequel to the old Christopher Reeve movies, and it's an okay movie, but quite forgettable in my opinion. But the true reboot of the series came with Man of Steel in 2013, a movie that not only rebooted the Superman character, but also gave birth to the problematic and messy DC universe in movies. Although, we need to stop and reflect about the amazing conquer that Zack Snyder gave to Warner Brothers. They tried for years to make a Superman reboot, and he made for them. They tried for years to make a Batman vs Superman movie, and he made for them. They tried for years to make a Justice League movie, and he made for them. That means Zack Snyder is the man. But even with a universe that was quite messy, but moving ahead, there were some cancellations along the way. A movie about the Gotham City Sirens with the trio Catwoman, Harley Quinn, and Poison Ivy to be directed by David Ayer, the same director of Suicide Squad's the first movie. There would also be a Jared Leto's Joker and Harley Quinn solo movie. There would also be a solo Batfleck movie to be directed by Ben Affleck himself, where he would face the villain Deathstroke, and a good chunk of the movie would take place in the Arkham Asylum with the main villains of the Bat. And we all know about the unfortunate case of the Batgirl movie that most of you probably remember that was fully shot with the character being played by the gorgeous Leslie Grace. And it was cancelled after the arrival of the new Warner Brothers CEOs. And I know the studio is facing some renewal with the new reboot of the universe by the hands of our dear James Gunn. I am quite confident that he will do an excellent job with these characters, but I wish I had seen the cancelled Batgirl movie. I hope they release it someday, even though not officially, they leak it on the internet somehow, or I don't know, they make a documentary about it. So we can see the scenes and know the details of the plot, and we can judge by ourselves if it was worth it to cancel or not. I bet it wasn't, because we would have Brendan Fraser as the villain Firefly, and especially the Michael Keaton's Batman, that would continue his story from the Flash movie, with Batmobile and everything else. And this is it for now. As you noticed during the video, the background was not from this channel, BATGUS, but from my other channel, Trashing with Gus, where I talk about other movies that I like, especially horror, trash, and animes. So if you are a fan of this kind of content and you would like to check it out, I'll leave the link right down here in the description and on the top of the screen, because there are a bunch of other good stuff in there as well, alright? And of course, if you are liking the content of BATGUS, don't forget to leave a like in this video and subscribe, alright? See you in the next Bat video, and bye bye.